After divorcing her poor husband to marry his best friend, she mocked him in front of her elite business circle. But she never imagined the man she humiliated that night secretly owned the company they all worked for. The Ashford Society dinner was supposed to be her stage, a night of laughter, power, and validation. But it became the quiet battlefield where dignity bled behind polite smiles and crystal glasses. Her laughter sliced through the air like fine glass. His silence cut deeper than any insult. She flaunted wealth he once sacrificed everything to build. But beneath his calm eyes was a storm of unspoken power. How could the man she dismissed as irrelevant walk into that same society weeks later and make every person at her table stand in awe? What secret had he carried beneath that black suit she chose for his humiliation? And when the truth surfaced, why did her entire empire collapse in a single toast? The Ashford Society dinner glimmered under chandeliers that hung like suspended galaxies, their gold light reflecting against rows of crystal glasses. Conversations rippled through the elite crowd, executives, investors, and socialites whose laughter was as rehearsed as their smiles. Daniel sat quietly at the long mahogany table, the black suit his wife had chosen for him fitting too perfectly, almost like a uniform for his own execution. He didn't belong here, not tonight, not in her world anymore. Eleanor's laughter carried across the table like champagne bubbles, effervescent, sharp, and dismissive. "You wouldn't understand, darling," she said, her hand resting on Julian Hart's shoulder, her husband's best friend, now her business partner. The table chuckled politely. Daniel forced a smile, the kind that made the muscles ache but the soul stay silent. Every question she directed toward him wasn't conversation, it was performance. "Daniel, tell them," she said sweetly. "You used to have all these, what did you call them? Revolutionary ideas?" Her tone dipped just enough to draw laughter. He wanted to build an app that would change the logistics world. Now he's freelancing from his little home office. Isn't that adorable? The words struck harder than wine. Around the table, people chuckled, unaware or unwilling to sense cruelty beneath the humor. Julian shifted uncomfortably, but didn't intervene. Eleanor's satisfaction was precise, calculated. She raised her glass. To Daniel, proof that ambition without execution is just imagination. The toast froze him. He looked around the table and saw only masks, polite smiles, subtle pity, the same people who used to praise his potential. The irony was suffocating. She had orchestrated everything, the seating, the wine, even his suit. A black contrast against her ivory gown, symbolic of the hierarchy she'd drawn between them. He nodded slightly, choosing silence over defense. "To imagination," he said softly, his voice steady, almost indifferent. It unsettled her for a moment, the lack of reaction. Her smirk faltered before she quickly recovered. Dinner continued, the orchestra playing faintly in the background, but the laughter now felt forced, the air thick with something unspoken. Daniel's fingers brushed against the napkin, feeling the texture of linen, grounding himself in the moment. This wasn't just humiliation, it was awakening. When the dinner ended, applause followed the closing speech, but the clinking of cutlery echoed louder in his head than the claps ever could. Outside, as the cold night air replaced the suffocating warmth of the dining hall, he walked beside her in silence. The city lights stretched across the skyline like distant promises. In the cab, her perfume lingered stronger than her words. She scrolled through her phone, smiling faintly at a message he wasn't meant to see. He watched the reflection of passing lights on the window, thinking of how love can die quietly, without funerals, without witnesses, only echoes in conversations that used to mean something. By the time they reached home, the silence had names, the distance had shape, and he realized he wasn't part of her life anymore. He was her contrast. The apartment was too quiet when they stepped in. The silence didn't comfort him anymore. It accused. Eleanor moved through the space like a curator in her own gallery, heels clicking against marble floors she'd insisted on. Every corner spoke her language now. Minimal, expensive, cold. She set her clutch on the counter and sighed dramatically. "You could have at least tried to blend in," she murmured, not turning to face him. Daniel looked at her reflection in the mirror, flawless, composed, and hollow. "Blend in," he said softly. "You mean disappear?" She shrugged, slipping off her earrings. "You looked uncomfortable. I was just trying to help you feel relevant." He almost laughed. Relevant. The word lingered like smoke. He said nothing. Words had lost their value around her. Silence spoke louder. She walked into the bedroom, closing the door halfway. A moment later, the sound of running water filled the apartment. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, his mind replaying every smirk, every snide glance from the dinner table. He'd thought humiliation had a breaking point. Now he knew it didn't. It only deepened until it became numb. Then in the quiet rhythm of midnight, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" The voice was trembling, familiar. "Daniel, it's Naomi. Eleanor's best friend. The one who drifted away after the wedding." He straightened. "Naomi? Is everything okay?" There was a pause, the kind that carries guilt. "No, but you deserve to know." Her breath quivered through the line. "She's been seeing someone for months." He didn't respond at first. Words felt useless against disbelief. "You're sure?" "Yes," Naomi whispered. "A younger guy from her firm. She talks about him when she drinks. Says you're too kind to notice. Says she outgrew you." The words sank like stones. He stared at the glass table in front of him, seeing nothing but distorted reflections. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because tonight was cruel," she said, "and I couldn't watch her destroy you publicly and keep lying privately." He closed his eyes. The laughter from dinner echoed in his mind, her hand on Julian's shoulder, the toast to Daniel. It all aligned now, painfully clear. The mockery wasn't spontaneous. It was rehearsed, a performance for people who already knew the ending. "Thank you," he finally said, voice low but steady. Naomi's voice softened. "I'm sorry, Daniel." She changed. He hung up and sat in the dim room, the city's glow filtering through the blinds. Changed? No. She'd evolved into who she always wanted to be. Ruthless, admired, untouchable. He rubbed his hands together slowly, feeling the quiet tremor of resolve. In the distance, a siren wailed, a city's cry muffled by glass and ambition. He stood, walked to the window and stared out at the skyline. His reflection stared back, hollow yet alive. For the first time that night, Daniel didn't feel broken. He felt awake. Dawn crept through the blinds like an uninvited witness. Daniel hadn't slept. The night had been a long corridor of thoughts he couldn't silence. The city outside was already awake. Horns, footsteps, the mechanical heartbeat of ambition. But inside, everything felt paused. The phone call replayed in his mind, Naomi's trembling voice, the word affair circling like a fly that refused to die. He sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, the same one he used to sketch ideas for his logistics software. This time, he wasn't drawing systems or algorithms. He was listing facts, names, dates, patterns. Emotion is chaos, he told himself. Strategy is order. He dialed his brother's number. The screen read, Jacob Brooks, attorney. When Jacob answered, his voice was hoarse but alert. Dan, it's early. I need your help, Daniel said, his tone flat, almost businesslike. Eleanor's been cheating. I want to handle it right. Silence hummed on the line for a moment. Then Jacob exhaled. You sure? Positive. Jacob's lawyer instinct kicked in. Okay, no shouting, no messages, no confrontation. We'll do this clean. I'll have my partner check her records, emails, credit cards, cloud data. You still manage her shared drive? Daniel's eyes drifted toward the shelf where their old laptop sat, the one she'd abandoned when she got a new one. Yeah, she never changed the credentials. Good, Jacob said. Send me the login. We'll pull everything. I'll call Chris. He's brilliant with digital trails. The call ended. Daniel sat in silence for a moment, staring at his hands. They didn't tremble anymore. Purpose had steadied them. By noon, his brother and Chris arrived. Chris, a compact man with caffeine for blood, cracked open his laptop before even saying hello. So the cheating spouse special, he muttered, fingers flying. Let's see what we find. Within minutes, the screen began to populate with folders. Photos, receipts, hotel bookings. A pattern emerged like a map of betrayal. Daniel leaned closer as Chris opened one email thread. Eleanor's name on a luxury jewelry order sent to a name he didn't recognize. Another folder revealed pictures of private dinners, weekends away, a yacht party. She kept everything, Chris murmured, almost admiring the organization. Of course she did, Jacob said grimly. People like her curate their sins. Daniel's eyes stopped on one document, lease agreement. He opened it, scanning quickly. Only one name appeared. Daniel Brooks. No joint ownership, no secondary signatory. Jacob's brow rose. She's not on the lease. Legally, the apartment's yours alone. A slow realization spread through Daniel, like the warmth of sunlight breaking through fog. For the first time since the dinner, he felt something powerful. Control. He looked up, voice calm, measured. Then she'll be gone by Sunday. Jacob nodded. We'll make it official. The room was quiet again, but the silence felt different this time. Not heavy, focused. The kind of silence that follows clarity. When his phone buzzed hours later, her message arrived. You overreacted, he almost smiled. Not yet, he thought, but I will. The cafe felt almost too familiar. The faint smell of roasted beans, the quiet hum of early afternoon conversations, the same corner table where they'd once planned a future together. Daniel chose it deliberately. If endings had symmetry, this was where it should happen. Eleanor arrived 15 minutes late, wearing a cream trench coat and oversized sunglasses that made her look more like a headline than a human. She didn't apologize. You look tired, she said, taking a seat across from him. Her voice was soft, measured, like someone rehearsing empathy. I didn't sleep much, Daniel replied. He stirred his coffee slowly, eyes calm. Thanks for meeting. I was surprised you wanted to, she said, feigning relief. You've been so dramatic lately. He raised an eyebrow. Dramatic? She smiled with condescension. Naomi told me you called her. You think I've been unfaithful, Daniel? That's absurd. You're overreacting. He didn't answer immediately. The hum of the espresso machine filled the pause. Then he slid his phone across the table. Screen unlocked. You should probably swipe left, he said. She frowned, hesitating. Then she did. Each photo cut through her composure like glass. Her hand intertwined with another's. The yacht, the hotel lobby in Milan, the jewelry receipt signed with her name. Her throat tightened. For the first time in years, she looked small. Daniel, her voice broke into a whisper. You went through my private, he interrupted quietly, our shared drive. You uploaded everything there yourself. The words landed without malice. He wasn't angry. He was surgical. You made me feel invisible, he continued, his tone controlled. You didn't just cheat on me, Eleanor. You redesigned me. Every joke, every dinner, every darling, he's just a dreamer. That was your architecture, but you built it on lies. She stared down at the screen, hands trembling. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just needed more. He nodded once, almost sympathetically. Then you should have been honest. But since you weren't, this is me being honest now. Her eyes darted up. What do you mean? You'll leave the apartment by Sunday. Jacob's handling the paperwork. It's in my name alone. Color drained from her face. You can't. I can, and I am. He stood slowly, dropping a few bills on the table. You told everyone I was dependent. I guess it's time to prove you wrong. As he turned to leave, she reached out, desperation breaking through her poise. Daniel, please, don't ruin me. He stopped just long enough to look at her, his expression unreadable. I don't have to. You did that yourself. He walked out into the afternoon light, the city buzzing with life around him. Behind him, Eleanor sat frozen in the same cafe where love once began. This time, alone with the silence she created. Sunday arrived with an unsettling stillness. One of those mornings where the air feels heavier than usual, where even the sunlight through the blinds seems reluctant to intrude. Daniel woke early, dressed in quiet resolve, and sat by the window with his coffee. The city moved outside as if unaware that this was the day his life would be reclaimed. By 10 o'clock, the plan was in motion. Jacob arrived first, briefcase in hand, every step measured. Chris followed soon after, laptop tucked under one arm, his expression unreadable but purposeful. Naomi came last, looking nervous, yet determined. They weren't there for confrontation. They were there for verification, for closure. Inside the apartment, Eleanor was packing. The sound of zippers, drawers, and clinking perfume bottles filled the silence. She moved briskly, pretending she wasn't embarrassed by the audience. Her once confident poise had curdled into defensiveness. "You didn't have to make a spectacle out of this," she muttered, folding her designer clothes into suitcases that looked too expensive for their contents. Jacob remained professional. "We're here to ensure the move goes smoothly and legally. You'll take what's yours. Nothing more." Eleanor shot Daniel a glance sharp enough to cut. "You're really doing this? After everything I gave up for you?" He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "You gave up patience, not love. There's a difference." She scoffed, slamming another drawer. "You think this makes you strong? Throwing me out?" "I'm not throwing you out," he said evenly. "I'm setting boundaries." Chris ticked boxes on a digital checklist, while Naomi helped separate shared items. Furniture she purchased versus the pieces that had belonged to him. It was methodical, detached, almost surgical. Yet every item packed was a memory dismantled. The couch where they once planned their future, the painting she insisted on buying because it made the space feel successful, the glassware she never used but displayed as proof of refinement. When she reached for the framed photo from their early years, a younger version of them smiling through struggle, Daniel stopped her gently. "That one stays." Her lips parted as if to argue, but then she closed them. Maybe she knew that some things couldn't be taken, not even out of spite. By noon, the apartment was stripped of her presence. The rooms echoed again, emptier but freer. She stood by the door with her final bag, shoulders drawn tight. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, eyes glistening with a mix of anger and fear. Daniel didn't flinch. "No, I already regretted staying." She hesitated, searching for some fragment of control, but there was none left to find. When the elevator doors closed behind her, the silence that followed was not heavy, it was healing. Naomi exhaled first. "It's over," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "No," he said, looking around the room stripped to its bones. "It's just beginning." The apartment felt different that night, not just emptier, but breathable. For the first time in years, Daniel could hear the echo of his own footsteps. No curated playlists, no diffusers masking silence, no half-hearted conversations about furniture trends. Just quiet, real quiet. He walked slowly through the space, absorbing it as though seeing it for the first time. The walls, stripped bare of her artwork, showed faint outlines where her taste had overwritten his. He trailed a hand along the paint and smiled faintly. "Not yours anymore," he murmured. By morning he had a plan, not for revenge, but for reconstruction. He opened all the windows, letting sunlight flood in. Dust swirled lazily through the golden beams as if the place was exhaling too. He put on old music, the kind she used to call too sentimental, and let it fill every corner. Naomi stopped by later with coffee and a small plant. "For a fresh start," she said. He laughed. "You're becoming poetic." She shrugged. "No, just glad you're free." They unpacked boxes together, not her things but his old ones stored away when she had decided the apartment needed to look successful. Out came his grandmother's quilt, the faded travel photos, the bookshelf he'd built himself years ago. Every item reclaimed was like taking back a piece of his own history. When Naomi left, he went out for paint. The man at the hardware store asked what color he wanted. Daniel paused, then chose a warm blue. The same color their first apartment had been before Eleanor's gray aesthetic took over his world. That afternoon, he painted until his arms ached. With each stroke, the walls transformed. Soft edges, uneven textures, imperfections that looked more honest than perfection ever could. He didn't want the apartment to impress anyone anymore. He wanted it to reflect truth. He found himself laughing as he worked, splattering paint on his clothes, remembering how she used to scold him for messes. The memory didn't sting now. It liberated him. When the sun began to set, he opened a bottle of cheap red wine, ordered pizza, and called his brother. Jacob answered on the second ring. "You sound lighter," Jacob said. I am, Daniel replied. Turns out the view's better when you're not living for someone else's reflection. Jacob chuckled. You're quoting yourself now? Maybe. He smiled. Feels good. After they hung up, Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the city. For years, every skyline had reminded him of how small he felt. Tonight it looked different, like possibility. The hum of traffic below didn't sound harsh anymore. It sounded alive. He sipped his wine, the cool evening air brushing against his skin. Behind him, the freshly painted walls glowed softly under the lamplight. The apartment wasn't complete yet, but neither was he. Both were works in progress, and for once, he loved that. The news came quietly, almost like karma whispering through the city. Daniel wasn't searching for it. He didn't have to. It found him. It started with a call from Naomi one morning while he was arranging books on his newly painted shelves. Her voice carried that delicate tone people use when sharing gossip that borders on tragedy. You might want to sit down for this, she said. He laughed lightly. I've been sitting for months. Go on. She hesitated, then said, her lover found out about everything. About you, about the lies. He confronted her at the Hampton Summit, in front of everyone. Daniel paused, a book still in his hand. Everyone? Everyone who matters in her world, Naomi said softly. He shouted that she used him to climb higher in the company. Apparently, she forged a few expense reports to cover their trips. The compliance board's already investigating. He set the book down, not on the shelf, but beside him, and stared out the window. The city was bright that morning, almost too bright, the kind of clarity that doesn't belong to chaos. And her job? Suspended, pending review. It's bad, Daniel. He didn't smile. He didn't feel vindicated or vengeful. What he felt was distance, like watching a play he'd once auditioned for, but no longer wanted the role. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly. Naomi hesitated. Do you want me to send you the article? No, he said simply. Let her story end without me reading it. When the call ended, he stood there for a long time, listening to the faint hum of traffic below. Somewhere downtown, her world was collapsing under the same weight she once used to humiliate him. The irony was neat, poetic even, but it no longer fed him. Later that day, Jacob called too, his tone half proud, half cautious. Saw the news? She's being investigated for fraud. You were right to cut clean. Daniel leaned back in his chair, gazing at the sunlight tracing lines across his desk. I didn't want to be right, he murmured. I just wanted peace. Jacob chuckled quietly. Looks like you got both. After the call, Daniel went for a walk through the park, a route he hadn't taken since before the marriage fell apart. Kids played on the grass, joggers passed by, and the sound of life went on, indifferent to the downfall of anyone. He found a bench under a tree, sat, and let the breeze wash over him. In that moment, he realized revenge wasn't always loud. Sometimes it arrived in silence, dressed as freedom. As the sky deepened into evening, he whispered to no one in particular, let her learn what silence feels like. And with that, Daniel stood, hands in his pockets, and walked toward the fading sun. No bitterness, no triumph, just peace. Rebuilding wasn't glamorous. It started with long nights, blank screens, and a single idea that refused to die. The same logistics optimization software Eleanor once mocked. Daniel had shelved it years ago, calling it too ambitious, but now, without her voice in his head, it felt alive again. His old laptop hummed on the kitchen table, surrounded by coffee mugs and scribbled notes. Every algorithm, every data model, was rewritten from memory and pain. He poured into it what he couldn't say out loud. It wasn't just code anymore. It was resurrection disguised as math. Months blurred into focus. Naomi became his sounding board, Jacob his legal compass. Together they formed a small circle of trust around an idea that began attracting attention. A startup incubator in Boston accepted his pitch. Apex Vector Technologies, a logistics AI system capable of saving corporations millions through adaptive route prediction. Investors called it genius. He called it redemption. 16 months later, Apex Vector was valued at $600 million. Within another year, major corporations were licensing his platform. He had moved from his modest apartment into a sleek yet humble workspace overlooking the city skyline. A view that once symbolized exclusion now felt like ownership. One afternoon, as he was finalizing a merger proposal, Jacob entered his office holding a document. Guess who's on the board of Ridge and Hart Consulting, the firm courting us for partnership? Daniel didn't look up immediately. Don't say it, Jacob smirked. Eleanor Brooks Hart. Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. The name didn't sting anymore, but the irony was poetic. Then it's time to make it official. A month later, he arrived at the Ashford Tower Ballroom for the signing event, the same venue where she'd once mocked him. The room was filled with executives, cameras, and familiar faces from her elite circle. The air carried that same expensive arrogance he once endured. The announcement began with formalities. We are honored to welcome Apex Vector Technologies as our strategic partner, the host declared. Please join us in celebrating this merger, valued at $3.8 billion. As the applause started, Daniel stepped onto the stage. The murmurs rippled before anyone could process the full circle moment. Eleanor, seated at the VIP table, froze mid-toast. Her hand trembled slightly as he took the microphone. Partnerships, he began, voice calm and resonant, are built on trust. When trust collapses, systems fail. Tonight isn't just about business. It's about alignment, ethics, and the long journey from failure to foundation. He turned slightly, eyes meeting hers. She looked away first. After the speech, as cameras flashed, she approached him hesitantly. Daniel, I didn't know, he interrupted gently. You never asked. She stood speechless, the din of applause fading behind her. And as he signed the merger papers, the signatures that once symbolized humiliation now stood for triumph. Quiet, precise, and irreversible. The same crowd that once pitied him now whispered his name with reverence. The ballroom had emptied into murmurs and champagne trails. Laughter thinned into whispers, and the glow of chandeliers dimmed to a softer hue. Daniel stood by the balcony doors, city lights glittering beneath him like a reflection of everything he had rebuilt from ashes. The merger had been sealed, the cameras packed away, and his name, Daniel Brooks, CEO of Apex Vector Technologies, now echoed through conversations once too expensive to include him. He heard her before he saw her. Eleanor's heels clicked against the marble floor. Measured, tentative, unlike the confident rhythm she once commanded. When she appeared in the doorway, her face was pale, her poise fractured by the weight of realization. Daniel, she said softly, stopping a few feet away. Please, I just need a moment. He turned calm and composed, a man not untouched by pain, but unburdened by it. You already had a lifetime of them. Her eyes glistened, the mask finally cracking. I didn't know it was you. I swear, if I had known... He raised a hand gently, cutting her off. You would have behaved differently? That's the point, isn't it? She faltered, her voice trembling. I made mistakes. I was selfish. I was lost. Daniel looked past her, toward the reflection of their former lives in the glass doors. No, Eleanor, you weren't lost. You were searching for status, for applause. You found them both, just not peace. She swallowed, tears clinging to her mascara. Do you hate me? He shook his head slowly. No. Hating you would mean you still matter that much. Her breath hitched. I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me. He almost smiled, but it wasn't cruel. No, you didn't ruin it. You revealed it. There's a difference. You showed me what love isn't, what loyalty isn't. And for that, he took a slow breath. I'm oddly grateful. She stepped closer, her voice desperate. Can we at least talk? Maybe have coffee sometime? I'm not asking for forgiveness, he interrupted softly. You already have that. But reconciliation? No. Her lip quivered. Why not? He looked at her with the kind of compassion that comes only after complete healing. Because we can't rebuild what was never meant to last. You taught me something powerful, Eleanor, that silence can be strength. Tonight, I return the favor. For a long moment, neither spoke. The ballroom behind them glowed faintly, its luxury suddenly meaningless. She blinked away tears, whispered something like, I'm sorry, and walked toward the exit. Her figure disappeared into the hallway, smaller than he remembered, quieter than he ever thought possible. Daniel stood alone, the city stretching before him like an open page. The wind from the balcony brushed his face, carrying the faint echo of applause from below. He smiled, not out of victory, but peace, the kind earned only after surviving betrayal without becoming it. A year later, the city had changed, but maybe it was Daniel who had. The skyline no longer looked like a wall he had to climb. It felt like a view he'd earned. The name Apex Vector Technologies now appeared in Forbes features and tech journals, but he wore success like a quiet coat, never loud, never heavy. His mornings were simple again: coffee, sunlight, silence that felt alive, not empty. The apartment had transformed into a sanctuary of calm blue walls, warm lights, and a scattering of green plants. It wasn't a designer statement, it was home. The kind that reflected peace, not approval. He looked up as laughter filled the air behind him. Her laughter. Maya leaned against the kitchen counter, her curls tucked into a messy bun, glasses slipping down her nose as she tried to pour cereal into a mug instead of a bowl. "Okay, don't look at me like that," she said, laughing at her own mistake. Daniel grinned. "It's called breakfast, not innovation." She giggled, shaking her head. "Innovation needs testing. You of all people should know that, Mr. CEO." He crossed the room, stealing a kiss on her cheek. She wasn't glamorous or polished like Eleanor. She was real. A designer he'd met at a conference, someone who cared more about ideas than appearances. Their relationship wasn't built on control or admiration. It was built on ease. She asked questions he wanted to answer. She saw him, not his net worth. They worked together sometimes, her designing sustainable packaging systems, him developing the tech that powered them. Every project felt like building something honest again, brick by brick. Later that afternoon, Daniel attended a charity tech gala as a guest speaker. The event was held at the same Ashford Tower where everything had once fallen apart. But tonight, the air was different. The same marble floors that once echoed humiliation now carried footsteps of quiet triumph. His speech was about innovation, but underneath it, every line was really about healing. "Sometimes," he said to the audience, "failure isn't the end of the story. It's the start of the truth. You don't rebuild from pride. You rebuild from pain when you stop needing to prove and start learning to create again." The applause was steady, respectful, not the kind bought by status, but the kind earned by authenticity. As he left the stage, Maya squeezed his hand. "That was beautiful," she whispered. He smiled softly. "It was just honest." Outside, the city glowed beneath them, the same skyline that had once witnessed his humiliation, now framing his rebirth. He paused for a moment, taking it in. The noise, the lights, the endless motion. It all felt human again. He thought of Eleanor once more, not in anger, not even in memory, but in gratitude. Some storms don't come to destroy, they come to clear the air. Daniel turned to Maya and said, "Let's go home." And as they walked hand in hand into the night, the city lights shimmered like forgiveness, proof that sometimes the quietest victories are the loudest of all. The man they once mocked at the dinner table had become the name they whispered with awe. In the same world where pride once dressed itself as power, Daniel Brooks had learned that silence could roar louder than humiliation. He never shouted, never sought revenge. He simply built, one line of code at a time, until the empire that rose from his heartbreak became the mirror that reflected everyone else's truth. Eleanor's laughter, once the sound of arrogance, now echoed only in boardrooms that no longer invited her. She had traded love for luxury and found herself with neither. But Daniel, he discovered that the greatest wealth isn't counted in millions, but in peace. He rebuilt not to prove her wrong, but to remind himself he was right, to believe, to love, to rise without bitterness. And when the world that once mocked him finally stood to applaud, he didn't bow. He simply smiled, because his victory was never about them. It was about redemption, quiet, unshakable, and beautifully earned. Dear viewers, sometimes revenge doesn't come with destruction, it comes with dignity. Because when life betrays you, rebuild so powerfully that the world can't remember who broke you, only who you became after.